But it's an inclusiveness. I won't say that it's non-judgmental, because sometimes the conversations are all about judging each other.
Long before Tom Hanks became America's favorite actor, he was running around in heels and a dress on a forgotten sitcom. But did you know the show was created by accident, filmed on a cursed stage, used a fake Billy Joel, and killed its own premise in season 2? Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Bosom Buddies. Fact 1. The cross-dressing premise was an accident.
He and I met, we picked up the scripts, and we started screwing around, and I actually thought, oh, this is it. This is how this works.
When creators Chris Thompson and Robert L. Boyett walked into their pitch meeting at ABC, they had no intention of making a show about men dressing as women. They wanted to create a sophisticated buddy comedy about two advertising copywriters navigating life in New York City. And they confidently told the network executives their show would be like something Billy Wilder would make. The executives seemed intrigued and asked them to elaborate on that comparison, so Thompson and Boyett mentioned Some Like It Hot, Wilder's classic 1959 comedy, where Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon disguised themselves as women to escape the mob. The moment those words left their mouths, everything changed. The ABC executives immediately seized on that single reference and demanded that the new show include men in drag as its central premise. Thompson and Boyett were completely stunned because they had only mentioned Some Like It Hot as one example among many Billy Wilder films, but the network wouldn't budge. The executives loved the cross-dressing angle and insisted it become the foundation of the entire series. What started as an offhand comment during a pitch meeting accidentally became the defining characteristic of Bosom Buddies, transforming a straightforward workplace comedy into one of television's most memorable, high-concept sitcoms. The creators had to completely rebuild their original idea around this new requirement, creating the storyline about Kip and Henry disguising themselves as women to live in an affordable all-female apartment building, all because they casually name-dropped the wrong Billy Wilder movie at the wrong moment. Fact 2. Peter Scolari was cast days before filming.
That I owed it to my associates to sort of give Henry a second look, sort of run him up the flag.
The role of Henry Desmond, one of the two leads in Bosom Buddies, almost went to a completely different actor, and the show's entire dynamic could have been dramatically different. Tom Hanks had already been cast as Kip Wilson, but the producers initially selected another actor to play opposite him as Henry. However, during early rehearsals and chemistry reads, it became clear that something wasn't working between the two performers, and the producers made the difficult decision to recast the role just days before they were scheduled to begin filming the pilot episode. At that exact moment, Peter Scolari happened to be working on an adjacent soundstage at the same studio lot, appearing on another television production. Someone from the Bosom Buddies production team either spotted him or heard about him through studio connections, and they quickly brought him in for an emergency audition with Tom Hanks. The chemistry between Hanks and Scolari was immediately apparent and undeniable, giving the producers exactly what they'd been searching for in their two leads. Scolari was offered the role on the spot and had only a matter of days to prepare before shooting began. This last-minute casting decision turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened to the show, as the natural rapport between Hanks and Scolari became the heart of Bosom Buddies and would define both of their careers for years to come. The two actors remained close friends long after the show ended, with their genuine friendship translating perfectly to the screen. Fact 3. The pilot was shot differently than everything else.
But she has a mirthfulness. Part of it is being, she's a...
If you watch the pilot episode of Bosom Buddies and then immediately watch the second episode, you'll notice something looks drastically different between the two, and it's not just the actors settling into their roles. The pilot episode was shot entirely on film, giving it a cinematic quality with richer colors, deeper shadows, and a more polished visual aesthetic that was typical of movies and higher-budget television productions. However, when the show was picked up for a full season, the producers made the unexpected decision to switch to videotape for every subsequent episode, which was cheaper and faster to produce, but created a noticeably different look. Videotape had a flatter, brighter appearance with less depth and a more immediate, stage-like quality that many multi-camera sitcoms used during that era. The transition was jarring for viewers who watched the episodes in order, as the show suddenly went from looking like a feature film to looking like a typical studio audience sitcom. To this day, no one has provided a definitive explanation for why the pilot was shot on film when the producers apparently knew they would be using videotape for the series, though budget considerations were likely the primary factor. This choice made the pilot episode stand out as a unique piece of the show's history, with a visual style that was never replicated again during the series' two-season run, creating an odd disconnect between the show's introduction and everything that followed. Fact 4. The Billy Joel theme wasn't Billy Joel.
It's a felt tip pen. All I have to do is draw it in first. It's cold.
One of the most memorable aspects of Bosom Buddies was its upbeat opening theme song, which featured Billy Joel's hit, My Life, playing over scenes of Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari running through New York City in various disguises. The song was the perfect choice for a show about two guys reinventing themselves and taking chances, and viewers naturally assumed they were hearing Billy Joel's original recording from his 1978 album, 52nd Street. However, what audiences actually heard during the show's original broadcasts was a cover version performed by Gary Bennett on vocals with Mike Lucas on piano, recorded specifically for the series, because the producers couldn't afford the licensing fees for Joel's original recording. The cover was well done and captured the energy of the original, but it wasn't the piano man himself singing those famous opening lines every week. The situation became even more complicated years later when Bosom Buddies was released on DVD, because by that point, even the cover version's licensing had become too expensive or complicated to secure. The DVD releases completely replaced the My Life theme with an entirely different song called Shake Me, Wake Me, performed by Stephanie Mills, giving the show yet another opening theme that confused fans who remembered the series from its original run. This meant that Bosom Buddies effectively had 3 different theme songs throughout its existence, with Billy Joel's actual voice never being heard on any version of the show. Fact 5. It was filmed on TV's most famous stage.
You guys can go on and be hip, clever young guys, and we said we're
Right
down with that.
Yeah.
Bosom Buddies was taped at Paramount Studios on Stage 25, a soundstage that has an almost mythical status in television history and has been home to some of the most beloved sitcoms ever produced. Before Bosom Buddies arrived, Stage 25 had already hosted The Lucy Show during the 1960s, where Lucille Ball continued her comedy legacy after I Love Lucy ended. After Bosom Buddies wrapped production in 1982, the stage didn't stay empty for long, as it became the home of Cheers from 1982 to 1993, one of the most critically acclaimed and popular sitcoms in television history. When Cheers ended, the stage seamlessly transitioned to housing Frasier, the spin-off series that ran for 11 seasons from 1993 to 2004, and won a record-breaking 37 Emmy Awards. This means that Stage 25 at Paramount was continuously producing hit comedy shows for over 4 decades, making it one of the most prolific and successful soundstages in the history of American television. The stage became known for its excellent acoustics, efficient layout, and perhaps a bit of good luck that seemed to follow the productions filmed there. While Bosom Buddies may have been one of the shorter-lived shows to occupy that space, it was part of an extraordinary legacy of comedy that made Stage 25 a legendary location in the entertainment industry. Fact 6. Tom Hanks met his future wife on set.
Know what was going on. I was told to do, and I did what I'm told.
Moved to L.A.
During the second season of Bosom Buddies in 1981, a young actress named Rita Wilson appeared in an episode, playing a small guest role that brought her onto the set where Tom Hanks was working as one of the show's stars. This brief encounter would eventually lead to one of Hollywood's most enduring marriages, though the path from that first meeting to their wedding would take several years and some complicated timing. At the time Wilson appeared on Bosom Buddies, both she and Hanks were involved in other relationships, so their interaction remained purely professional, and nothing romantic developed between them during the show's production. Hanks was married to his college sweetheart Samantha Lewis, with whom he had 2 children, while Wilson was also in a relationship. The two went their separate ways after filming Wrapped, and Bosom Buddies was canceled not long after Wilson's episode aired. However, fate brought them back together 4 years later, when they were both cast in the 1985 comedy film Volunteers, which filmed in Mexico. By that time, Hanks was separated from his first wife, and the chemistry between him and Wilson blossomed into a romance during the production. They married in 1988 and have remained together ever since, becoming one of Hollywood's most stable and beloved couples. Without that small guest appearance on Bosom Buddies, they might never have met at all, making the short-lived sitcom an unexpected matchmaker for one of the entertainment industry's most successful relationships. Fact 7. The characters were named after bars.
Tom Hanks, speaking of Tom Hanks.
Nicest kid in the world.
Peter Scolari.
Peter Scolari, nicest man in the world.
The 2 main characters in Bosom Buddies, Kip Wilson and Henry Desmond, got their first names from an unlikely source that had nothing to do with the show's New York City setting. Creators Chris Thompson and Robert L. Boyette both had connections to Berkeley, California, where the University of California campus had fostered a vibrant student culture with numerous bars and hangout spots that became legendary among generations of college students. 2 of the most popular establishments near the Berkeley campus were a bar called Kip's and another called Henry's, both of which served as gathering places where students would meet, socialize, and spend countless hours during their college years. Thompson and Boyette decided to honor these Berkeley institutions by naming their 2 lead characters after these beloved bars, creating a subtle California connection in a show that was ostensibly about 2 guys living and working in Manhattan. The choice was purely a nostalgic nod to their own experiences and had no bearing on the characters' backgrounds or the show's storylines, making it the kind of inside reference that most viewers would never catch unless someone explicitly pointed it out. Neither Kip nor Henry ever mentioned California or Berkeley in the series, and the characters had no connection to the West Coast in their fictional biographies. So the naming choice remained a private joke between the creators that only became public knowledge years later when they discussed the show's development in interviews. Fact 8. Donna Dixon was a beauty queen runner-up.
Well, the show that will not die. I have quite a fascination for that show. We never knew, I don't think any of us.
When the producers of Bosom Buddies cast Donna Dixon to play Sonny Lumet, the beautiful and sophisticated neighbor who becomes the object of affection for both main characters, they were casting someone who had real-world experience with the kind of attention and scrutiny that comes with being judged on appearance. Just a few years before landing the role, Dixon had competed in the Miss USA pageant system and achieved remarkable success at the national level. In 1976, she was crowned Miss Virginia USA, winning her state title and earning the right to represent Virginia at the Miss USA pageant in 1977. At that national competition in Charleston, South Carolina, Dixon made it all the way to the final round and finished as the first runner-up to Miss USA, meaning she came incredibly close to winning the entire competition and would have assumed the title if the winner had been unable to fulfill her duties. This pageant background made her casting as Sonny Lumet almost too perfect, as the character was meant to be stunningly beautiful and the kind of woman who would naturally attract attention wherever she went. Dixon brought an authentic grace and poise to the role that came from her experience on stage during the pageant competitions, even though Bosom Buddies never explicitly referenced her character as a beauty queen. She went on to have a successful acting career beyond Bosom Buddies and later married actor Dan Aykroyd in 1983, remaining with him for over 4 decades. Fact 9. The final line was devastatingly ironic.
Henry, if you want to live in this little kid's fantasy world, go right ahead.
When Bosom Buddies aired its final episode on March 27, 1982, the show ended with a line of dialogue that became tragically ironic the moment the series was canceled. In the last scene of the series finale, one of the characters delivers the line, "You know, no matter how old I get now, I'll never get tired of watching this," speaking about something they're viewing in that moment within the context of the episode's plot. The writers had no way of knowing when they crafted that dialogue that it would become the very last words spoken on Bosom Buddies, as television series are often canceled after their episodes have already been written and filmed, leaving creative teams unable to craft proper endings for their shows. The phrase, "I'll never get tired of watching this," took on a bittersweet double meaning for fans who loved the series, as it expressed exactly how many viewers felt about the show itself, even as ABC was pulling the plug on the series and ensuring that audiences would have no more new episodes to watch. The accidental poignancy of that final line has become part of the show's legacy, representing both the affection that the small but devoted fan base had for Bosom Buddies and the unfortunate reality that television shows rarely get to control how or when their stories end. It stands as an unintentionally perfect epitaph for a series that ended too soon. Fact 10. A union strike destroyed Season 1.
Microphone is right there and you can't move and you have to be like this and it's like, and then they save the last thing for you.
Bosom Buddies premiered in November of 1980 with genuine momentum and positive buzz, but its first season was immediately derailed by circumstances that had nothing to do with the quality of the show or the performances of its cast. In the summer of 1980, the Screen Actors Guild went on strike over issues related to compensation for actors working in television and film, and the strike dragged on for months, shutting down productions across Hollywood and preventing new episodes of television shows from being filmed. By the time the strike was resolved and production could resume, Bosom Buddies had lost crucial weeks of its first season, resulting in an abbreviated run that prevented the show from building the kind of consistent audience momentum that new series desperately need during their initial year on the air. Instead of having a full season of 22 or 24 episodes to establish its characters, storylines, and comedic voice, the first season of Bosom Buddies consisted of only 6 episodes, which meant viewers barely had time to discover the show before the season ended. This truncated first season made it much harder for the series to gain traction with audiences, as there simply weren't enough episodes available for viewers to become invested in the characters or for the show to develop a devoted following. While Bosom Buddies did return for a second season with more episodes, the damage had been done, and the show never fully recovered from losing that critical early momentum during its debut year. Fact 11. ABC killed it with constant schedule changes.
We're held up by the standard of where you were on the schedule at night, and we were opposite a little show called Magnum P.I.
One of the most frustrating aspects of Bosom Buddies for both its creators and its fans was ABC's handling of the show's time slot, as the network seemed unable to decide where the series belonged in its schedule and kept moving it around with alarming frequency. When the show first premiered in November of 1980, it actually performed quite well in the ratings, attracting a respectable audience and showing genuine potential as a viable comedy series. However, instead of keeping the show in one consistent time slot, where viewers could find it reliably week after week, ABC executives repeatedly moved Bosom Buddies to different days and different times throughout both of its seasons, making it nearly impossible for casual viewers to keep track of when new episodes would air. This constant schedule shuffling was devastating for a show that needed time to build a loyal audience, as viewers who enjoyed the series would tune in at the expected time only to find a different program airing, while new episodes of Bosom Buddies appeared at random times when the show's fans weren't looking for it. The practice of moving shows around the schedule was unfortunately common during this era of television, as networks tried to use established shows to boost ratings in week time slots or to counter-program against hits on competing networks, but it rarely worked and usually just confused and frustrated audiences. By the time ABC finally canceled Bosom Buddies in March of 1982, the show had been moved so many times that its remaining viewers had largely given up trying to find it. Fact 12. The showrunner took the job for money.
To a friend of mine, it was his birthday, and he made me do a playback show. I didn't like it at all. No, live is good for me.
Chris Thompson, who served as one of the creators and the showrunner for Bosom Buddies, later admitted in interviews that when he first agreed to develop the series, his motivation was almost entirely financial rather than creative. He needed the paycheck that came with running a network sitcom, and he took on the project without any particular passion for the concept or excitement about creating a show about men dressing as women to live in an all-female apartment building. Thompson was honest about the fact that he viewed Bosom Buddies as a job rather than a labor of love when he signed on to write and produce the series. However, something unexpected happened once production actually began, and the show started taking shape. Thompson discovered that working on Bosom Buddies turned out to be one of the most enjoyable and creatively fulfilling experiences of his entire career in television. He later described it as my completely favorite experience in show business, which was a remarkable turnaround from his initial mercenary attitude toward the project. The reason for his change of heart was simple. ABC largely left the creative team alone to make the show they wanted to make, without excessive network interference or constant notes and changes from executives. This creative freedom was relatively rare in network television and allowed Thompson and his team to experiment with the show's format, take risks with the comedy, and develop the characters in ways that felt natural rather than being dictated by corporate mandates. Fact 13. Paul Rudd and Adam Scott made a 2014 remake.
Which is a good choice.
Thanks. And then the last one was Bosom Buddies.
Right, which was fantastic.
More than 3 decades after Bosom Buddies went off the air, the show received an unexpected tribute that brought together its original stars and 2 of modern comedy's biggest names. In October of 2014, actors Paul Rudd and Adam Scott created a frame-by-frame recreation of the Bosom Buddies opening credit sequence for the Adult Swim special, The Greatest Event in Television History, a series where contemporary actors meticulously recreated famous TV opening sequences from the past. Rudd and Scott dressed in drag and performed the entire opening, matching every shot and movement from the original 1980 credits as they ran through streets, jumped on trampolines, and mugged for the camera in wigs and dresses. The production went far beyond just Rudd and Scott's involvement, as they managed to secure cameo appearances from Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari themselves, who briefly appeared in the recreation to pass the torch to the new generation of comedians. Perhaps most impressively, the producers convinced Billy Joel to actually sing My Life for this remake, meaning that Billy Joel's voice was finally associated with Bosom Buddies for the first time ever, decades after the show ended. The recreation was hilarious and affectionate, showing that Bosom Buddies had maintained a place in popular culture memory despite its relatively short run. The special became one of the most talked-about episodes of The Greatest Event in Television History and introduced a new generation to the original series. Fact 14. Thelma Hopkins was a famous singer. First,
I had our very favorite Christmas song put on it. You're kidding. Merry Christmas.
Before Thelma Hopkins joined the cast of Bosom Buddies as Isabel Hammond, the building supervisor at the Susan B. Anthony Hotel. She had already achieved significant fame in the music industry as part of one of the most successful pop groups of the 1970s. Hopkins was the female vocalist for Tony Orlando and Dawn, the trio that dominated the charts with massive hits including Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree, Knock 3 Times, and Candida, selling millions of records and becoming household names during the early part of the decade. Her transition from music to acting was still relatively new when she was cast in Bosom Buddies, making the sitcom one of her earliest regular television roles. The show's writers were clearly aware of her musical background and decided to have some fun with it by including a meta-reference to her past fame. In one episode, the character Kip Wilson gets arrested and ends up in jail, and Hopkins's character Isabel makes a joke about tying a yellow ribbon around something, directly referencing Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree, the song that Hopkins had helped make into one of the biggest hits of 1973. The joke was subtle enough that casual viewers might have missed the connection, but for anyone who knew Hopkins's background, it was a clever acknowledgement of her musical career and the fame she'd achieved before becoming an actor. Fact 15. The show killed its own premise in season 2.
Third or fourth or fifth year, and Bosom Buddies was on stage 25. So we were like the ugly stepchild.
When Bosom Buddies returned for its second season in 1981, the show made a creative decision that essentially abandoned the entire concept that had defined the series and made it distinctive in the crowded landscape of network sitcoms. The original premise of the show required Kip and Henry to maintain their disguises as women in order to continue living in the affordable Susan B. Anthony Hotel, creating comedic situations where they had to hide their true identities from the other residents and avoid being discovered. However, by the beginning of the second season, the writers had gradually revealed Kip and Henry's secret to almost every major character on the show, including their friends Sonny and Amy, and even the building supervisor Isabel, who was supposed to be enforcing the women-only policy. With nearly everyone aware that Kip and Henry were actually men living in drag, there was no longer any real reason for them to continue the charade or any tension around the possibility of being caught. As a result, the second season featured dramatically less cross-dressing than the first, with Kip and Henry appearing in their regular male clothing for most episodes and only occasionally putting on their female disguises when the plot specifically required it. This transformation turned Bosom Buddies from a high-concept show about men living secret double lives into a more conventional workplace and friendship comedy that happened to feature characters who had previously dressed as women.